Welcome everyone to Color Commentary. We are your pauper commentators, Michael Petchik and Adrian Guarzales. How's it going, Adrian?
Fine.
Okay.
How are you?
I'm doing okay. Moving on to our upkeep. You wanna start us off?
Yes. Mike. Yeah, sure. So friend of the show, good all around good guy. Alexander Ullman 5-0'd with mono white aggro, I believe is what he ended up titling it. Guardian.
Yeah, I was
white.
gonna say he's referring to it as Guardian White. I think Guardian Gift would also work, but you know, potato.
It's a white little thing deck, but his tech was to add Guardian of the Guild Pact and Gift of Orzhova, which I think was in the league. Or the challenge, I should say, last week, but he piloted it to a 5-0 victory. Congratulations to him. It's a big win, especially with a deck that he knows so well. So that's awesome.
Yeah, good on you, Alex.
Speaking of videos, I am making them weekly. The Adrian Show, brought to you by our sponsors, Adrian and Show. And by the time you're listening to this, they should already be up. As of day of recording, which is Wednesday night, I'm planning on playing Red Deck Wins and serenading you with some of my stories of my early days playing Magic the Gathering Constructed. We'll see if that's how that ends up panning out. I did get some requests to do some Affinity videos, but we'll see. Over to you, Mike.
All right. As always, this podcast is an affiliate of Original Magic Art. If you're a big fan of old school Magic Art, new Magic Art, just, Magic Art in general, Original Magic Art has some really cool stuff. They're currently working on, I believe they have them made. I think they're just waiting to ship. They're coming out with playmats with the Circle of Holding Hands version of Hymn to Torok. It's a good one. It's in the top 50% of Hymn to Torok arts in my mind. But they do stuff like that. They've done things in the past such as Baleful Strix. They did Yavimaya Coast. They've got Karn Liberated coming out soon. Really solid people over there. They also do the classic art series of tokens. They even have a pack of tokens specifically for Pauper. But lots of cool old school art. I'm a huge fan as a former art student currently employed in an art related field. But, if you're going to go over there and order something from them, use the code Commontary, all caps, spelled just like in our name, and you will get 5% off. And that's our affiliate link. So they'll, kick a little bit of the cost back to us. And it's a way to support the show. If you don't have a need for classic art tokens or beautiful playmats or any of the other number of wonderful things at Original Magic Art, we're on Patreon. Patreon's a pay by episode service. You can limit how much you want to pay per month. So you can kind of make sure that you can support us without, spending more than you'd like to. We've got all sorts of rewards over there. I promise I will get those thank you cards out ASAP. We might do them while Adrian's here visiting, but they will get out there. But if nothing else, you get advanced access to episodes. This will go up on Wednesday.
I have a confession I need to make.
What?
In addition to all this, I bought a color commentary playmat from Inked Gaming with our faces on it.
That is true.
I'm gonna make you sign it.
There you go. Also worth mentioning, we are on Inked Gaming. So, if the Patreon wasn't doing it for you, if Original Magic Arts tokens and playmats and dice bags and all these wonderful things that they provide aren't doing it for you, you can also just buy a playmat with a picture of our faces on it. And frankly, I feel like if the other two weren't doing it for you, that one might not either. But, I might as well put it out there. We're on Inked Gaming. If you go there, we're under artists. There's a bright little picture of our faces. You see it every week. So, you should be able to pick us out from a crowd. Apart from that, thank you for subscribing. Let's get into the show. Adrian picked out a deck this week, and what are we talking about, buddy?
Well, as the renowned Boros Monarch player, we are, of course, talking about Boros Monarch, which is actually pretty good because Lord Beerus won last week's challenge with it. And so I figured now's as good a time as any to talk about the deck. It's very sweet. It's also very expensive online, I've noticed. Very cheap in paper, though. It's about half in paper what it is on Moto, which is insane.
Yeah, I was gonna say we sat down. Actually, it was before we even sat down to do this. You like set up the dock, and I checked into it quickly, and I was like, "Good God, does it really cost that much online?" But you know, these cards get up there.
Yeah, well, we'll get into it and we'll talk about what's expensive. Let's start with our creature base. We have 4 copies of Glinthawk. So a big thing about this deck is that it is constantly returning artifacts to its hand for value. You can, play Alchemist. I'll explain some of the draw engines first. We have 4 copies of Alchemist's Vial, which is unique to this deck over the tokens variant. Alchemist's Vial is 2 colorless for an artifact that when it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and then it has 1 sacrifice. Target creature cannot attack or block this turn. So and then we have 4 copies of Prophetic Prism, which are 2 mana, enter the battlefield, draw a card, and you can use it to filter mana from your lands. So Glinthawk and its companion Core Skyfisher, which are both flyers who return, in Glinthawk's case, an artifact, in Core Skyfisher's case, a permanent to your hand. You're able to rebuy these over and over again and continuously draw cards. Now, that's not to say there isn't other synergy. For instance, rounding out our creature package are 4 3-bit inspectors, W for a 1/2 that creates a clue token when it enters the battlefield, so you can use it as a draw engine or early blocker, and 4 copies of Palace Sentinels, which is really what separates this from the Kuldotha version. That's a 2/4 for 4, 3 and a white. When it enters the battlefield, you become the Monarch, and you can pick up those bad boys with Core Skyfisher and keep using them to your heart's content.
Okay, so you already touched on the fact that, instead of running something else for the cantripping artifacts, this deck is running Alchemist's Vial, and you've put in the paces with this deck. How often does the text part of Alchemist's Vial come into play, the activated ability?
All the time. Alchemist's Vial, it turns out, is like, I just could not have. You could have said, "Hey, Adrian, what is the card that a deck like this would need in order to help facilitate Palace Sentinels?" I would have scratched my head and shrugged and been like, "Gee, I don't know. I guess some sort of artifact that draws cards synergistically with the rest of your creatures and somehow defends you being the Monarch." I would have said something stupid though, like, "Oh, deal 2 damage to target creature or something." But instead, we have this, which enables you to also shut down stuff like Gurmag Angler or any range of bigger than X2. The card is actually very, very good in the deck, and I would expect it versus the Monarch decks. It fits part and parcel with what they're trying to do, especially since they shaved Kuldotha Rebirth. They don't want to play Ichor Wellspring anymore because that card is bad without Kuldotha Rebirth. It just sits there. It's a lump.
Yeah. So I guess my question is, since the ability is relevant, what are kind of your prime juicy targets that would make you, because usually by turn 2, you have a pretty good idea of what your opponent might be on. What are some situations where you would rather have the can't block ability over a mana fixing?
This situation, you almost never play Palace Sentinels on turn 4. Unless they have a totally empty board and they're not playing red deck wins or creatures with haste. You basically want to set up a turn where you play Palace Sentinels and eliminate their threat. So if you are able to have out an Alchemist's Vial, it can sort of help facilitate that plan where you are able to leave open the mana in order to make their creature unable to attack and therefore hold on to the crown, which is really what this deck is all about. And if you watch my videos, you can see that you make some very bad trades because you know that the Monarch is going to refill your hand so quickly, and it's such a bummer to lose it. It's a very dangerous mechanic, but it's very worth it if you can defend it, and this deck is exactly the kind of deck set up to do so.
Well, so, I haven't had a whole ton of time to play Pauper recently, but I've been playing EDH with some friends, and I threw together Queen Marchesa, and the Monarch ability is real. Like, if you can kind of, insulate yourself just well enough to hang on to it for a couple of extra draws, the return on investment is absurd. And in here, you're turn 5, you're just setting up what is going to turn into very rapidly a one-sided Howling Mine.
Yeah, dude, it's such a strong ability, and it's so terrible when you lose it, which is why the deck is set up to defend it as long as possible.
Now, how about you touch on some of the removals so that we can see the other ways in which we can defend the crown?
So Lord Beerus's deck is a little bit different than the one I ran. First of all, it's running one copy of Firebolt, which is R for deal 2 damage to target creature or player, flashback 4 and an R. He's done this instead of a Journey to Nowhere, which my list was playing 3. His is only playing 2. I assume a he because of the title Lord, by the way. So I do like the Galvanic Blast as tech. I think it's a much more versatile spell than the Journey to Nowhere, so I do like it. I might make that innovation on my own list. Thanks, Lord Beerus. We also have 4 copies of Galvanic Blast, which is R, deal 2 damage to target creature player, Metalcraft, deal 4 instead. 4 copies of Lightning Bolt, R, deal 3 damage to target creature player. So that's our removal suite, the Journeys, and then the red removal spells, which are sort of the premier removal of this deck, because we're able to play functionally 8 Lightning Bolts, basically. 4 of them are obviously better at certain times or worse at others, but it's not bad.
I was gonna say, maybe the Firebolt is just because the deck I'm immediately gonna go to that I think this is great against is gonna be Stompy.
This deck has an incredible Stompy matchup. It did even before the Monarch innovation.
Yeah, and would you say that the Monarch actually makes that matchup more or less favorable? Because I'm kind of imagining, the hands where they have Rancor, you probably have a hard time hanging on to the Monarchy, and the last thing you want is Stompy drawing 2 cards a turn.
Now, that is interesting that you say that. I would say that the Monarch is still a good bet in that matchup. You would just need to be a little bit more aggressive in your removal. And we'll get to the sideboard later. I actually think I disagree with some of these choices. But this deck also runs 1 copy of Prismatic Strands in the main, which is 2 and a white for prevent all damage that from a color of your choice for the turn. Flashback, tap a white creature. So we have Prismatic Strands as an out to sort of these aggressive decks that might try and steal the crown. And then we can follow it up with our 10 or 11 removal spells. Plus we have the Alchemist's Vial as pseudo removal. And by and large, our creatures are better than Stompy's creatures. The only thing that gets is the Rancor. And there was actually a game in my video series that I did lose against my opponent, was able to resolve 3 of them game 1. But I ended up going on to win that match.
Okay, so obviously you do have answers to Rancor in the deck, mainly in the form of, instant speed removal. I don't know. And how many Journey to Nowheres were you running when you got your little 5-0 there?
3.
Okay. And Prismatic Strands?
Just the 1. I think 1 is fine.
You think 1 is fine? I guess, yeah. You are drawing quite a few extra cards off the Monarch.
And then rounding it out, we have 2 copies of Battle Screech, which is the format's, quote unquote, lingering souls. 2 white, 2 to create 2 1/1 flying bird tokens. Flashback, tap 3 white creatures you control. And so actually that has led me to another innovation, which I did discuss on Reddit a little bit, which is to play Rally the Peasants in this deck. One thing I noticed is this deck sometimes has trouble closing out games, and I like having Rally as just an I win button. And in my paper list, I am playing it over the copy of Fireball. So I'm playing 2 copies of Journey to Nowhere, and then instead of the Firebolt, I am playing Rally the Peasants.
Okay, I could definitely see Rally being good in a pinch. You're not going super, super wide with your tokens, but occasionally you're going to have those hands where, your 4s are going to be, your 4 and your 5 could be Battle Screech, Fastback, Battle Screech, Flashback, Battle Screech. So it is nice to have sort of a, as you referred to it, an I win button. And I think that's very much what that card is.
So let's talk about the lands, because I got some opinions about them.
Okay.
We have 3 copies of Ancient Den, 3 copies of Boros Garrison, 1 Forgotten Cave, 3 Great Furnace, 2 Mountain, 2 Plains, 3 Radiant Fountain, 2 Secluded Step, 3 Windscarred Crack, for a total of 22 lands. If I were playing with this mana base, I would cut a Mountain and a Plains and add 2 more of the artifact lands. This deck is not soft to Gorilla Shaman or Ancient Grudge on the lands. I don't see a reason to not play the extra ones, especially when you're trying to get Metalcraft online. But I think the Gorilla Shaman is a very poor board-in choice against this deck. And if my opponent were to bring that in against me, and in fact, this has happened, it's only good against very specific hands. And I've had people waste valuable time off of even a Gorilla Shaman or even the green spell Lethal Sabotage.
Yeah.
Where they just waste turns trying to double stone rain me, and so I'm just able to carry the game off of the backs of my non-artifact lands, which there are plenty of. I think I also like 2 Boros Garrisons instead of 3, and I would maybe cut 1 and play an additional Windscarred Crag. I don't think this deck really cares about its turn 1 plays that much. Really, the only good one is a turn 1 Thraben Inspector. Glinthawk's a pretty terrible turn 1 play, and there's not, Bolt, Fire Blast, or Bolt, Lightning Bolt. I mean, Bolt, Blast, or Firebolt, sorry, I'm getting all tongue-tied, aren't exactly turn 1 plays either. So this deck can afford a certain amount of coming to play tap lands, but I do think that 3 Cyclers is the sweet spot.
Okay. Yeah, that I can see that. That was definitely one of the things that as soon as the Koldatha build of, the more token heavy build started showing up with Rally the Peasants, I definitely very quickly realized oh man, bringing an artifact hate here is terrible. You're never killing anything that you really want to kill, and the games where it's good are just so few and far between.
Yeah, it's not a reliable sideboard card at all.
Yeah, especially because a lot of your red decks where you could side it in, your red deck wins and your aggressive red decks, either, or even let's look at a blue red Delver. That deck runs fewer mountains, so you're either mulliganing into a smaller hand in all likelihood, or the other option here is you just have an uncastable Gorilla Shaman, and by the time it would matter, by the time you can cast it, it no longer matters. So I think
right.
I think Gorilla Shaman and Artifact Hate in general is terrible against this, when you'd much rather be as a red deck, you'd much rather be bringing in Electrickery. And
even then, this deck isn't that soft to Electrickery either. The only thing that's weak to that are the 2 copies of Battle Screech. So, I think that this deck is able to fade a lot of, a lot of hate, which is originally why I switched to it back in the tokens days, because I was so tired of losing Gorilla Shaman.
Yeah, I mean, you're also, you're not relying on Koldatha Rebirth, which I still think is a bad card. Just going to be honest about it. I think it's a bad card.
That's fair. I mean, I think it was one of the weakest parts of the tokens deck, because it forces you to play cards like Ichor Wellspring. So
yeah, whereas this lets you play a card in the form of Alchemist Vial that can actually win you the game. It does more than just draw you into something that could win you the game and force you to spend resources to get there. This draws you a card, and then, sometimes you just need them not to block with one thing. Or sometimes you just need to buy that extra turn versus a big threat, and this will let you do that. Exactly that, in fact. I don't know. I remember when Origins came out, there was some buzz about whether Alchemist Vial was good, and this was back in the day when people were running, the 3-color Koldatha lists with blue for Muldrifter, and I think it was not real back then. I think now it's a little bit more real.
You mean the card or the deck?
The card, specifically Alchemist Vial.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, Alchemist Vial, and I mentioned this in my video too, is it looks like draft trash. It doesn't do anything really great, but when you combo with the Glinthawk and the core Skyfisher, suddenly you have a little engine going. And and of course, if that was the only card, it'd be well, why even bother? But we also have the Prism, and we also have Thraben Inspector. And I think Thraben Inspector is really what catapulted the kitty style list, if you want to call them that, to the 2-tier. I would say tier 1. I think the deck is tier 1. I know it doesn't get the same amount of results as some of the other tier 1 decks, but I think it's up there.
I think for the first time in my life, I can say a Skyfisher deck is solidly tier 1, because
good. Thank you, Mike. I needed that.
It was always back in the Jeskai days, it was always kind of, it did a lot of nothing very efficiently. And
yeah,
it just kind of preyed on the fact that, sometimes people ran silly decks that, just playing a fair deck that beat in with 2 power flyers was enough.
And let's get into that topic in just a second. First, I want to go over the sideboard real fast. We have 2 copies of Electricity, 3 copies Gorilla Shaman. That's fine. 4 copies Pyroblast, going to run you a little expensive on Moto. 2 copies of Ancient Grudge, 1 copy Cop Green, 2 Lone Missionary, 1 Prismatic Strands. I would redo this. I would play Ray Revelation. I think that card is amazing, and it's one of my favorite sideboard cards. I might play a Relic of Progenitus, although that's not exactly great in our deck. And I would also play some number of Standard Bearers because they're so good against Stompy, although it's already a pretty good matchup. I think Cop Green is a mistake. Cop Green gets blown up by Lethal Sabotage, and I just don't think it matters as much as Standard Bearer. Standard Bearer, Stompy almost can't deal with it unless they have brought in exactly. I mean, I guess they could have the card that pumps their guy and then they fight, but Gut Shot's really the one I'm thinking of. So I would redo the sideboard a little bit, but obviously I'm not trying to detract from the win here. This is an incredible win, and I'm very happy to see the deck at the highest levels of play in the format.
Yeah, I definitely think that those are fair conclusions to reach. Like I gotta imagine that Gorilla Shaman might not be the best pick here. I might kind of, having gotten some experience with the tokens version of this list, I might prefer what am I thinking of here? Ancient Grudge.
There's 2 Ancient Grudge and 3 Shamans.
Yeah, I kind of would lean more heavily into effects like Ancient Grudge, but Affinity has been putting up results. So
it's a menace in the format, and if you don't prepare for it, you're going to get crushed by it.
Yeah, I think I also agree on the Cop Green. I honestly have never felt good about running a Circle of Protection that wasn't red.
Right. Well,
or black, I guess, even though most of their big things are lose life effects, like Gray Merchant, who, by the way, where is he? Milk carton side ad.
Gary,
have you seen this Miss Man?
Have you seen me? Have you seen? It's a chorus song.
Okay, there we go. I figured, you don't always need to spoil your moment.
Sorry,
but okay, so this took down, a fairly diverse field. Like, that's one of the big things we've been seeing coming out of these challenges is the top 32, which is what we get in terms of results, has been kind of different than the leagues. And I'm really glad that, something we hypothesized ages ago on the show, that leagues are distorting the image of what the actual metagame looks like. I'm kind of glad that we're seeing that's true. Now, that said, 7 rounds and a cut to top 8 is different than a league. So there are decks that'll do well in leagues that won't do well in the course of a 7-round tournament with a cut to top 8. There are ones that'll do well in a challenge, but won't be able to, have a lower chance of getting 5 in a row. So what are your thoughts on what you've been seeing coming out of these Pauper challenges?
My feelings are varied and the same. No, you hit the nail on the head. It's enabling us to see the metagame through a completely different lens. I think that Alex pointed out that although most of the decks are blue-red Delver, for instance, they're not doing as well as you might think they would. Same with Stompy. So it's clear that some of the results are at least a little distorted by the way those decks crush through leagues. They just are able to go very, very quickly. So I don't know. It enables us to look at the metagame in a different way, and it also begs the question of deck choice. Am I playing this deck for a league? Am I playing this deck for a challenge? And I think Boros has it in both places. It might be a little bit less favored in the leagues because it's kind of a long game style of deck, but I think it's very well positioned right now. If you're interested in the deck, I would definitely buy into it.
I've also got to imagine there are some matchups for Boros in particular that are a little rough. I'm thinking
Tron is not good.
Tron, I could imagine, you kind of need a specific hand to dodge burn. I'm seeing 2 Lone Missionaries in the side here, and that'll probably get it done. But just Prismatic Strands is, a little rough. So I could definitely imagine burn occasionally being an issue. But I don't know. This is events like the challenges are places where these sort of solid mid-rangey decks get work done. If you can, because the challenge is about performing consistently over time, not just, get 5 wins in a row. It's, rally from your 0-2 to 5-2 and maybe get cut to top 8 if your breakers are good. So I really like that this has forced, people to kind of reconsider how Pauper works as a format in a different context. So I think, how many weeks in? What, 3?
We're already rolling in the data.
Yeah, there's so much good data coming out of this, and I'm really happy with what it's doing to the format. It's, it's giving people, a reason not to just run 60 main deck jank cards that work some of the time and just repeatedly hitting join league. It's forcing people to actually think about what they're doing in this format, and I like that. Do you want to take us into our discussion topic that you picked out for us today, Adrian?
Yeah, and you sort of started talking about it. It's called A History of Kitty, Skyfish, or whatever you want to call them, decks, and why Boros is better, The Gathering. So, Mike, why don't you rehash some of the gripes that we had about the Jeskai version of this deck way back in the Stone Age of a year ago when we first started recording?
I mean, this was a year ago, but that sort of version of the archetype has been around for a while now. And my biggest issue always with it was, it never found a really solid win condition, because, you're doing these things where you'd, Skyfisher and Glint Hawk to get back your cantrip artifacts. And then, you draw a lot of cards, but the issue was your cards never kind of had quality in a density. And like you never had a win con that was more than just beating in with 2/2s, right?
And what was the other card this deck played that made it blue?
It was Muldrifter. The eternal, like, I don't know, spackle to hold together the wall of a terrible Pauper deck. I don't know, like we've talked about this a lot off the show. Like Muldrifter lets you paper over a lot of weaknesses in a deck. That card is very good.
Right. And would you say that was the primary reason those decks were playing blue, was to play Muldrifter and sort of patch over the fact that they didn't have access to the kind of tools that we now have access to in simply red and white?
Yeah, I would definitely say that, it was that and, occasionally board stuff, when you're going up against burn, it is super nice to be able to board into hydroblasts. And, there are these fringe effects like Aura Flux that can really help you with your Boggles matchup. So there were reasons to run blue outside of the card draw, but the main attraction was being able to have the flying fish on turn 3 or 5, whichever you needed. And from there, we kind of saw like there were all sorts of versions of this deck that kind of filtered in and out throughout the years. Like there was a brief stint where there was that Mardu version of it that was running black so that it could run. I'm blanking on them. The 4/3 for 5 that drains.
Bleak Coven Vampires.
There you go. There was a Mardu version that ran that, and then also got to run what was it? Mortuary Mire, to put creatures in the graveyard on top of the library and, kind of grind a little bit harder that way. And there were red-white versions that were a little bit more aggressive. There were the white-blue versions, the acid trip decks that occasionally from time to time still show up. And those abuse the combination of reality acid and the core Skyfisher effects, as well as being able to run Dreamstalker, which I think is one of the better defensive options, especially if you're trying to recycle things with the return something you control to its owner's hand. So, but they always kind of had the issue of no finisher, right?
So in the end, really what pushed the deck over the edge is not just the Thraben Inspector printing, it's also the Rally the Peasants printing, which firmly cements you into red and white. Why bother screwing around with Muldrifters when you can just win the game?
Yeah, and a while back I was watching one of the Card Kingdom Rags to Riches, and there was someone who was on called Off the Tokens, and they referred to Thraben Inspector as a mono white Muldrifter. And, they weren't 100% wrong. It bothers me to say that, but I see what they were getting at.
Well, it's essentially 2 cards, right? Like that's why it's good. And then in a pinch, you can use Glen Hawk to pick up the clue token. So Thraben Inspector is a huge boost to the deck. And then of course, Rally the Peasants sealed the deal. And then Palace Sentinels printing on Moto, which is really what people mostly care about. It was obviously printed before it was actually on Moto. Palace Sentinels is sort of, I would say that's more the Mull Drifter now, where it's just a continuous value engine, where you are continuously drawing cards, and so the deck is able to go through very quickly. You're able to go through the deck very quickly, and you're able to, just the raw cards, you're able to normally find what you need in order to win the game.
Yeah, and just having access to like a higher quality of creature, like you're forgetting that Palace Sentinels has a body attached to it that happens to block a decent chunk of the metagame on the ground pretty decently. Like,
oh yeah, absolutely.
That is stopping most of the threats out of Stompy naked pretty well, and it will even trade with one of them wearing a Rancor and nothing else. So it's not nothing. And I think one of the weird things is when the Monarch cards came to Pauper, the first one that everyone like attached onto as being the better out of the, because we got 4, right? We got 2 white, 2 black, one that actually makes you the Monarch, and one that has an effect if you are the Monarch. And everyone immediately just like glued on to Thorn of the Black Rose has to be good because it has Death Touch attached to it. And I guess my question for you is, do you think that Palace Sentinels in the current metagame is just a better card?
It is, because it's in the better deck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I'm getting at here is, in a vacuum, I think I'd prefer Thorn. Like, with nothing else there, I think I prefer something that's always going to trade with whatever it blocks pretty much. That said, there's no really great black deck right now. And I think Palace Sentinels does a really good job of, providing a decent body, but also providing one of the most absurd draw engines in our format. Like, how many cards would you say in a game you draw because of Palace Sentinel's ability to make you the Monarch? Like, just ballpark for me.
I mean, I've ended games with 8 cards in my library. It's a lot. It's quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, like the combo of that and being able to like cycle away lands late game when you don't need them, your artifacts cycling for stuff, the Prophetic Prisms giving you near perfect mana, even though you don't usually need it that much. Like,
right. Being in 2 colors, you really, normally your mana is just fine. There are very few games where I don't have the colors I need.
I've got to say, when I've played like the tokens version of this list, because I haven't had a chance to actually play around with the Monarch version, the tokens version, I was running Ancient Grudge out the board, and that was probably what I used Prophetic Prism for the most. Also, situations where I drew into a burn spell that I needed and didn't have another red mana. But I don't know. I think I really like how this deck has sort of come together over the years to not need to sort of hobble its own mana base in order to justify existing.
Right.
Because as you pointed out, like how many, like I just need to do some math real quick here. Tap lands, we're looking at like 6 tap lands and a couple of colorless lands. Like, the mana is still not great, but it's good enough, right?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah, it's just that the deck it needs to hit like 5 mana and then it's fine, and then you can start cycling stuff. Really, some of the best tech in there is also the bounce lands, being able to replay the Radiant Fountains or cycle your Secluded Steppe or Forgotten Cave after you've already played it. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, the incidental value of gaining 2 life every now and then, or even 1 if you've got the Windscarred Crag and no Radiant Fountain to bounce. It's not nothing. Like, I saw a post literally today on Reddit of someone who had just gotten back into the format with Burn, and they were saying, like, it feels like this is not a good deck in the format anymore. And someone pointed out, people are running gain lands, and just incidentally over the course of the game, like sometimes that adds up to 3 life, which is essentially time walking burn for free. So
yeah, I don't think that burn is a very good deck in Pauper either.
yeah, I think we've finally gotten to that point where there's just enough incidental life gain in a lot of like tier 1 lists where burn, I'm sure, will, you know, put up results in the challenge. And, you know, if you're a dyed in the wool burn player, this is not me judging you. This is me saying that we've finally gotten to that point where, you know, this deck it gets to run prismatic strands in its main board. Like, that's absurd to me.
You're going to have a bad time.
Yeah, like we've just gotten to that point where the metagame has evolved in a way that is hostile towards a burn deck because you have very few axes of interaction, and a lot of the sideboard cards for burn are frankly absurd. Like, you're not coming, like, I want to know if any burn players out there who listen to this have ever managed to rally back when your stompy opponent managed to cast a formidable Feed the Clan. Like, that card is 10 life. Or, you know, like, have you managed to rally through a cop red? Because short of Flaring Pain and very good timing and a very good draw, you're not winning that game. I don't know. It's burn is probably, you know, kind of consigned to the every now and then, and you really want to be playing something like Red Deck Wins if that's your style of deck, because we don't have Goblin Guide, but I hate to say this, Valley Dasher does like a moderately okay impression? Question mark?
Yeah, I think that Red Deck Wins is the best red deck right now.
I mean,
it's also the deck. It's the deck that also can take the most advantage of Burning Tree Emissary.
I was also going to say it's literally right there in the name. It says that it wins. It's fairly self-evident. But back to the topic of like the Skyfisher decks. I think also worth noting is the fact that like we've got a lot of 2/2s running around the format right now between Stompy and Red Deck Wins, both of which that have been putting up numbers repeatedly. A deck that gets to run 4 actually 8 main deck things that just stop Stompy from attacking with Burning Tree Emissaries unless they've got something on them is probably pretty decently positioned, because I think it would be fair to say that Stompy is the premier aggro deck of the format, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's fair. Sure.
No, and I mean, like, fine. Red Deck Wins is also just full of 2/2s with efficient mana costs, and I kind of can't help but look at it and go, you know, you've got all these creatures that line up very well against the aggro decks, and you get to run all these main deck kind of dirtily effects such as Radiant Fountain, your main deck Prismatic Strands, and your Alchemist Vial to kind of pillow fort you long enough till you can start beating in for lethal. So I don't know. I like the deck, and you can go back to our first episode, and I think I trash talk the hell out of, at the time, Koldatha Jeskai. And
yeah, well, like we said, the blue version makes it much worse.
Yeah, be careful who you make fun of in high school. All that good stuff.
Yeah, now he's not blue and he's jacked.
Oh yeah, just completely torqued. Like just
so
went to the
torqued.
gym, absolutely shredded now.
Get pet Shrek'd.
Terrible. I can't believe that you would do this to me on a Wednesday in my own home and force me to listen to bad memes from my friends.
Get used to it, buddy. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm just going to actually quickly pull up the Pauper Challenge results, because I want to say that there was something else in the top 32 that I was interested in, and I need to quickly, you know, like someone in the Matrix, just skim through the Matrix. There were 2 mono white aggro lists in the top 8. That was one of the big things of note. Apart from that, like, we're kind of seeing more of the same. We've got Boggles, we've got Stompy, we've got Mono Red, we've got, a decent amount of Dinrovatron, which, how are you feeling about that right now in the current metagame?
It's fine. It's Tron deck. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a Tron deck. They will do what they do, and sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
I know some people get frustrated by Tron, but it has bad matchups, believe it or not. So stick with it.
Yeah. I do want to talk to you about Blue-Black Flicker and its place in the metagame. Is this deck still reliable?
I mean, it's still winning, so I'd say yes.
It's still winning. But I
don't know if it's a better control deck than Tron. I think Tron's probably the best control deck.
I have a feeling that you're completely correct about that, and it's a matter of figuring out what the optimal 75 look like here, because they're all over the place, and the main takeaway, at least from what I've been seeing in the results, is efficient removal is now king. Electrostatic bolts and stuff like that are pretty good in today's metagame. Yeah, because I'm looking through, I see a couple of Marasatron lists, and Affinity is, doing its thing. Has Affinity ever actually fallen out of favor?
No, it's always been a good deck, whether it's in the top 2 or the top 4 is really what telescopes for it. And to me, it seems mostly like it's based on how much artifact hate is there in the format. Right now, it's pretty high. Blue Red Delver plays Gorilla Shaman, and the green deck plays, or Stompy plays, Gleeful Sabotage, which are 2 of the most heinous hate cards in the format. That being said, Affinity is, I was going to say life finds a way, but I guess metal finds a way. And it's still able to sort of claw its way up the rankings, but it loses to itself so much. I mean, that's why I stopped playing it. Right, I just was so tired of losing to Gorilla Shaman, and also the fact that you have to keep one lander Springleaf Drum Frogmite, and you're like, well, I hope I draw something else.
Yeah. I mean, it is one of those decks that kind of sometimes does just lose to itself. I'm actually going to drop in our little chat program here, I'm going to drop you a link to the Pauper Challenge. Scroll all the way down to the bottom. I want to talk about, for a second, the weirdest sideboard card I've ever seen in Delver. Aeoli Pile?
Something's up. For some reason, we use Discord to talk, and for some reason, it had minimized itself to a very small window.
Huh.
So I just had to rekajigger it real fast.
But now I'm opening the challenge. Let's talk about Aeoliopile, which I've never seen before. And
it's an artifact.
Yeah,
right?
It's
from forever ago, and it looks kind of like a top, I want to say. I'm still loading the page. I have a bunch of this card at home. Go ahead.
So it's 2 for an artifact, and 1 in tap, sacrifice Aeoliopile, deal 2 damage to target creature or player. I had forgotten that this card existed, and I'm kind of shocked to see it being played, but I can kind of get why it's here.
I mean, it's here to deal with Stompy, right?
Stompy and red deck wins. It doesn't seem good, but that's
why would you not just play the blue-red version?
Yeah, I was gonna say. I mean, obviously, the cost of that deck is absurd online. But I don't know. I'm definitely now scoping through weird. That's bizarre. I'm frankly completely confused. There's a Boggles deck running Crimson Acolyte in the sideboard.
It has pearl red.
Wait, why would you run that?
I have no idea. That isn't.
Yeah.
It also looks like this deck is only running 1 mana Morpho. Oh no, they have Utopia Sprawl. Okay.
Yeah,
there's a lot. There's a lot of affinity in this list.
Yep. And a lot of the lists are pretty similar. It seems like Affinity has kind of settled into where it wants to be. A lot of more decks are running the Temur Battle Rage just because it incidentally sometimes wins you games without having to ATOG anything. So I can definitely understand why. Oh man. Who is this? Oh, yep, it's Leroy B coming through with Resounding Scream in the sideboard of Tron. Are you familiar? Are you familiar with the Resounding Cycle?
Yes, but for our listeners, why don't you tell them?
2 and a black sorcery. Target player discards a card at random. Okay, not great. Cycling 5 blue, black, red. So discard this card, draw a card. And when you cycle this, target player discards 2 cards at random. Amazing. I've seen this as tech before, and it's just hilarious to me that this is even fringe playable. These things are a beating, right? Like paying 8 mana to him to Torok your opponent and draw a card is not great, but I mean, if you then immediately get it back with Mnemonic Wall, and I do not care for the fact that this deck's only running 1 Dinrova Horror, but that's possibly just me and my desire for people to play actual win cons instead of just assuming that they can get there. But, you know.
You ask too much of people, Mike.
I do. I constantly ask people to, you know, sit down and think about the decisions they're making instead of just making them. All right. So we've talked about the challenges. I still can't believe that we're at a point where I am excited to talk about a core Skyfisher deck. That just boggles the mind.
Boggles the mind, eh?
It does. It certainly does. We're coming up on about 50 minutes. Do you have an outro segment, a funny thing for the people at home?
Yes. Let's play What's That Card? Ding, ding, ding. Mike's our contestant today, as he is every day. Gatherer is back up. I'm going to hit the random button. We're going to see if Mike knows the card. Click. All right. We have an 8 mana legendary artifact creature with trample, 3 in a red, sacrifice an artifact.
This is Bosch Iron Golem.
And he gets it. He has to keep going, though. He has to get all 3. Random card. Oh, this is a portal special.
Oh, no.
We have a 2 blue, 2 mana, and a blue, so 3 total. A sorcery. Return target creature to its owner's hand. Draw a card. The flavor text says, inviting the soul to wander for a spell in abysses of solitude. Kate Chopin, The Awakening. It is a common in Portal. It was reprinted in Masters Edition 4.
God, I know what the fixed version of this is, because that's Repulse, but I have no idea what this card is. What is it? Please tell me.
This is Symbol of Unsummoning.
Oh, I actually know this card. It's got folio art on it, doesn't it? It's got like a guy dressed up in like vaguely like stereotypical Middle Eastern clothes with a turban.
That's a different card. I know what card you're talking about though, and actually I kind of want to look that up because it's not this card, but I know what you're talking about.
That has unsummoning in it as well.
Yeah, it does. This one's by Adam Brex, and it looks like a giant teeth monster, perhaps a Tog, about to eat a little curly Q with a guy in front of it. All right, I'm hitting random card again. Oh, this one's going to be a shoe-in. We have a creature for W. There's a 1/1, a human soldier. W, tap target creature. Flavor text. The essence of lawful society is swift deterrence.
Oh, this is Gideon's Lawkeeper, which is a functional reprint of Gold Meadow Harrier. And probably worse because it's not a Kithkin. And I kind of dig Lorwyn.
All right. Well, we're going to give Mike redemption round. Dun, dun, dun,
Okay.
All right. This is from Ravnica, the city of guilds, the sexiest plane in the multiverse, some might say. It is 3 RR, creature, dragon, flying, haste. When blank enters the battlefield, target opponent creates 3 2/2 white knight creature tokens with first strike. Flavor text. The knights see a mighty quarry. The dragon sees breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
So I know this cycle and I know the naming structure for it. I'm pretty sure that this is Hunted Dragon, but it's got to be a dragon. It's red. Right?
It is Hunted Dragon.
Okay, I really like this cycle. of creatures. For those who don't know the hunted cycle, it's all these like undercosted creatures where your opponent gets something that answers them perfectly. Super cool design wise. I really like them. They're kind of neat for multiplayer. What was the one that the black one is one of the more extreme ones, isn't it? It's like 2 mana for a 7/7 or something.
The Hunted Wumpus?
Hunted Horror.
Oh, look at that.
It's like a 2 mana 7/7, but your opponent gets creatures with protection from black, and it's black.
Yeah, they get 2/3/3 green centaur creature tokens with pro black, but it does have trample, so maybe you could hit them for 1 a turn.
Well, I mean, the whole thing is, I think they just sit there. Oh, yeah, you could beat in for 1, but then they could also just start beating you to death with centaurs. But they're neat. If you can stifle that trigger, I guess that's cool. But I don't know, cool Magic stuff. Do you have any more for me, or are we heading to the outro?
Well, I could do one more. This is a planar chaos card. So good luck. It costs 3 and a blue. It is an enchantment. It says artifacts, creatures, and lands your opponents control enter the battlefield tapped. And I know you know what this was shifted from. It is Kismet.
Yeah, I was going to say it's Kismet, and this is Frozen Aether.
Yes, you are correct.
Or Frozen Ether, as the pronunciation guy now says.
I think it's Ether.
Oh man, yeah, no, I actually know a lot of planar chaos stuff just because when I got back into Magic, I thought that the planar chaos border was super cool, so I spent a lot of time looking at those cards. Speaking of which, they've got funky sealed leagues coming up on Magic Online where you pick a plane, and if you choose to pick Dominaria, you get a pack of every part of Time Spiral. And go forth, folks, and hope you open a Sprout Swarm to make your opponent's day miserable. But why don't you take us out of the show, Adrian?
Well, Mike, I'm glad you asked that. Thanks for joining us today. This podcast is brought to you by the support of our Patreons. Consider supporting us if you like the show. Check below this video or the description of this podcast for details on where to find us. We'd like to remind you, if you're listening to this on a platform with reviews, they're always appreciated as they boost our visibility. If you've got a deck list or idea for a topic, become a patron. Not just kidding. Feel free to contact us either via our website or by emailing us directly at colorcommentary@gmail.com. Special thanks to Pat's Games and L. Till next week, this is Adrian and Mike, and we are signing off for Color Commentary.